Hello everyone and welcome back to another Getting Stuff Painted, my not at all bi-weekly update this time. It's been a little bit. Update on the various miniatures I've been painting for the games we cover here on the channel. It's been quite delayed. It's not that I haven't had time to paint. As you can see, I've been painting a bunch of stuff, but I've been very focused on producing content for one of the games we're going to talk about models wise over here in a second. So I haven't had time to really fit in a painting update because it's not a super high priority, but we're going to do it now because I've been painting way too many things, so we've got to get it covered in a video. And we'll be starting with the biggest chunk, which is all from Resident Evil, the board game. Small miniatures that are very quick and easy and fun to paint up with contrast paint. Then we have, I think, Shadespire scenery. We'll talk more about that in a second. A single model from BattleTech, a warband from Warhammer Underworlds, and then a model that is technically Age of Sigmar. But I have no intentions of playing Warhammer Age of Sigmar, but we'll talk about that as well. And then finally, some Batman miniature game models, the leftover models I hadn't painted yet from the last unboxing for the game I did, and one model I picked up while also restocking some paint. As always, taking breaks to throw things for the dog who's currently below me and is shedding everywhere instantly. You're going to see a lot of her hairs in videos for a little while. She's a fluffy dog in general, and she's shedding for a winter coat, I think. And it is just getting everywhere no matter how much I try and vacuum. Anyway, what was I saying? The game's recovering. I think I already covered that, didn't I? I got caught up. I see one of our hairs is right there. That's what we're mostly going to talk about. The hairs just get everywhere no matter how much I clean. The joys of having a very fluffy dog. Anyway, let's get started. From left to right, everything done in contrast paint. Based in Grey Seer, if you're new here and aren't aware of that, that's one of the two base coats that Citadel produces for contrast paints. And then, yeah, 90% of it is contrast paints, with the occasional normal paint as well that we'll talk about. So, left to right, let's get this done. So if you've been following this series for a while, you'll have seen when I talked about the models I painted for Resident Evil 2, the board game, Resident Evil 3, the board game, and I did much the same for Resident Evil 1, the board game. Yes, the order is confusing, but what can you do? They're going 2, 3, 1, 4 is the order they're going. Anyway, the very first model I painted up for this game was Chris Redfield, because he is the character I'd opted to play as this time, just because I played as Jill in Resident Evil 3. So for Chris, I feel like we should probably zoom in because these models are smaller than the scale I usually cover these days. So they're very detailed for how small they are. Contrast paint works really well with them. I used Striking Scorpion green, Basilicanum grey for his jeans, some Leadbelcher silver, Guilliman flesh for skin tones. His hair, I'll be honest, I don't remember what shade of brown I used. I think I just used Wildwood. It might be Gargax Sewer or whatever it's called. Either way, but that's Chris. For all the Resident Evil bases, I did exactly what I did for the other two board games. It's Basilicanum Grey, then Storm Vermin Fur, and Agrax Earthshade. And Citadel's Blood for the Blood God effect paint where relevant. I just realised I probably should have put a little bit of blood on Chris's base just so we could have the "Is this Chris's blood?" meme in model form. So then I have 3 zombies in the... I pointed this out during the unboxing and I can't unsee it. It really is just like him showing you his overly large hand, because the wrist is bending where it shouldn't be bending. The hand is a little oversized compared to his other hand, just on the model. I don't mean forced perspective, because obviously if it was like that, then of course the hand closer to the camera would appear bigger. But if you look at how big his other hand is, it's just a little mismodeled, which is fine. He's a zombie. He's meant to be a little bit weird looking. So for these guys, I just used the base coat for their white lab coats, Basilicanum Grey for their trousers, I think. Actually, no, that is Rattling Grime for their trousers, actually. It rides that thin line between a thinned out brown and a little bit of grey, which is actually, I really like it. Like Rattling Grime from the new range of contrast paint Citadel did, really good. I've fallen in love with that as a tone of paint. And Guilliman flesh for all their flesh tones, and a lot of blood for the Blood God, of course, because they're zombies. They've been eaten or are eating, so you've got to do that. More or less painted up identically. I kind of just winged it when it came to putting on the blood. If you want more details, specifically seeing a step by step, I've done in total 4 zombies with the like classic Resident Evil 1 PS1 era zombie style, which is green jacket, brown trousers. I've done 4 of these, and I did a step by step video for members. If you want to see it built up from literally just the red resin all the way to done. I don't remember if it's this one specifically, but it's one of these 4, because I did them more or less identical. So if you wanted to batch paint them, you could easily do all 4. I think there's 5 of each sculpt in the base box. You could easily do all of them in an hour, easily. Just doing part 1 for one model, moving on. By the time you get to the 5th one, you're ready to do the second step on the first one, because contrast paint dries real quick. So super easy to do, and if you have no painting experience and you are just wondering about getting into it, contrast paint is a really easy way to, and with a couple of washes on top as well, is a very easy way of just getting a model to a presentable tabletop standard. And the blood effects paint that Citadel does is really good, so it just works really well with zombies. Well, and anything really, but especially with zombies. I'll share a trick that I shared in the member video. That blood for the Blood God paint works especially well if applied to a wash while the wash is wet, in my opinion. I think it makes it look even more like actual blood, if you're looking for that kind of effect. If you're squeamish, maybe not so much. So I've only done 3 of this particular sculpt. This is alternative show me your hand, except this time the hand is correctly proportioned, so it doesn't look as weird. And I tried to paint him up like another basic zombie that you constantly run into in the GameCube remake of Resident Evil. That's Rattling Grime for his jacket, that is Wildwood for his trousers, and Aggressor Shade over everything, which I'm not sure if I mentioned yet, but Aggressor Shade over everything. If I want a character to look horrible and messy, Aggressor Shade. If you want depth to a character, non-oil. Those are the basic rules for when you use which over which. There's actually, I guess I can talk about this in a second once we move on to the scenery, but that particular skull right there, I just did that using a contrast paint. I used Skeletal Horde because that's what I always use for bone colour. But I actually did see it recommended that Grey Seer or Wildwood, Wraithbone, the other base coat you can do for contrast paint, if you just apply sepia, it's the sepia wash, it's something sepia, I don't remember what it's called, I don't use it that often, but if you just apply that on one of those two, apparently it creates a really good bone colour effect. It's actually better than that one. So anyway, we're still talking about Resident Evil. There's a lot more. There's 2 doggles. I'll be honest, I did these super early. I painted these right after Chris when I first got the box. I mixed 2 shades of brown. I believe it's Wildwood and the Gargax Sewer. It's not Gargax, but it's some orc name. You'll know it if you see it. And then a little bit of blood as well, and Bal Red to pick out the chunks of the dog that are missing, because they're a little bit decomposing, just a little bit. So next will be a Crimson Head, as in terms of things from the core box, but I did also paint up something from the Director's Cut box, which has not technically appeared in the videos yet, up close anyway, which is the prototype Crimson Head, which is a sort of mini boss in the GameCube remake of Resident Evil 1. Same colours as the green jacketed zombies from him. The only exception is I did a red wash over his skin tone because Crimson Heads look crimson. So that's really the only difference, in copious amounts of blood. So if you don't want to see the prototype, look away or skip ahead like 30 seconds. But here he is. Because I've only painted up 1 Crimson Head so far, I have had to substitute him in a couple of videos for the series. But he's one of the older ones. He's more horrible, he's more deadly. He doesn't go, like, he's not a super tough boss or anything. He's a mini boss, he's not an actual boss. But he is dangerous. Crimson Heads in general are dangerous. And the last 2 miniatures I also kind of previewed in that members only video on how to paint zombies. I painted up 2 sets of crows from the Director's Cut, which is just Black Templar, and the zombie they're eating is again the green jacket zombie style. That's my favourite because that's what most of the zombies in the PS1 version looked like. There was slight variance, but most of them were just that green jacket brown trouser zombie, so that's why it sticks out in my mind as being the zombie from Resident Evil 1 to me. Like Resident Evil 2, sure, it's the cop zombies. Resident Evil 3, there's one particular one in Resident Evil 3 that has a black shirt and blue jeans that you run into forever. That's the zombie that sticks out to me in that, and Nemesis himself, of course. But that is it for now. For the other Resident Evil stuff I need painted up before I can record more, painting up a boss as we speak. It's on the paint table right now. I don't really want to have to paint up any more zombies if I don't need to, but I've got to paint up spiders and I've got to paint up little snakes as well, so they'll definitely be in the next update. One ball throw later, so I think this is from the Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire when they released some terrain to fill out terrain hexes on the boards, and I managed to pick one up and I painted up 4 of the 6 you get, I think. There's one more single hex and then there's a double one. So they just have like fancy themes. This one is meant to be a crystal. I used a couple of different yellow contrast paints, cyan and yellow for closer to the base, and the new one that's named after an orc for the tips, and then tried to do a little bit of dry or edge highlighting rather with Grey Seer. Probably went on a little thick. I can't do thin edge highlighting. It's just not in my wheelhouse at all. The stones for all of them are just Basilicanum Grey. The bones on the bases of all of them are Skeletal Horde. And this is just kind of like an acid pit using Striking Scorpion contrast, I believe it was. It actually works out really well because of how well detailed the inside of that pit is. It's so bubbly, it just looks genuinely like it's bubbling. And the contrast paint just fitted it so well. And this was probably made before contrast paint existed. Now this one, this Sarlacc pit wannabe thing, is meant to have tendrils coming out of it, but I could not for the life of me, even with the instructions, work out how they were supposed to slot into the holes in there, so I decided not to bother because it was just frustrating me. I actually used a new contrast paint on this one for the flesh of the thing itself. I think it's called Magus Purple, M-E-G-O-S Purple, which is the much weaker purple that was in the launch range for contrast paint. I hope I'm saying the right name. It is a very diluted, almost pink purple, and I got it just to give it a go. It never looked that good to me. Like Shileish Purple was the only other option, which is a bit too much in the other direction, too dark, not enough tone. But in terms of something like if you're creating a slimy maw for a monster, I actually think it's perfect. It's very nice, and it applied smoother than I thought it would with how light and weak tonally it seemed to me anyway. So I think I used it somewhere else here as well, and I don't remember. Oh, I used it for the eyes on the Skaven, because some of them have they've got bloated eyes because they're infected with various diseases from the horned rat. So on the official paint job, so I used it on their eyes as well. So it looks like they have black eyes, but it's actually just that they're puffed up with like allergies. Then we have the skull. Already kind of talked about this, what I was going to talk about with I am definitely going to try the sepia tone as opposed to using Skeletal Horde next time I paint a skull of some variety. I'm really curious how that turns out, because the pictures I saw of someone doing a comparison, the sepia tone method looked so much better. So I'm going to test it and see, but experimentation required. Wouldn't want to fight the guy whose skull that belonged to, because he is so much larger than your average guy. So next time you might see the last two bits of scenery from that also painted. You might see them in the Underworlds video before you see it in the painting update, to be honest, but either way. Very quickly, just mentioning from BattleTech, actually, before we even do a break here, I just quickly painted up the Blackjack from the Alpha Strike starter set. That was one of the models I think I was forgetting last time. From the Alpha Strike starter set for the Northwind Highlander colours, talked about them for the last two videos, not going to bother repeating myself. Go back and watch if you want to hear the details. It's mostly Militarum Green though. There is the Atlas left, and there's an Archer, and then once those two are done, the inner sphere side of that box is entirely done, and it probably would have already been on the channel by now had I not been distracted by Resident Evil, the board game, and it doing so well on the channel, so I have to focus on it. We are still going to see it eventually, I hope by the end of the year, before the end of the year, but we'll see. So let's move on to the Skaven. We have Skabbik's Plague Pack for Warhammer Underworlds, which you may have already seen in a battle report. I'm not sure, I have to keep on pushing those back because they don't do well. So I just kind of put them up whenever. The two with the Nurgle Maggotkin warband, they sat waiting to go live for ages. But I used similar colours for all of them, so I'll just show them off as we're going through them. But this is a full warband, the newest warband released for Warhammer Underworlds. He's the boss. I don't remember any. I think he's called Rabidus actually. He's Skabbik, he's Rabidus. I don't remember any of the others' names. They have weird Skaven names, but whatever. So a lot of Militarum Green for their robes. We have a lot of Mantis Warrior Green. No, Striking Scorpion Green, sorry, the brighter one, for all their noxious gases and also crystals. With a little bit of Necron Glow or whatever it's called on the warp crystals themselves, just to make them bright. He's got one in a chalice there as well. For their skin tones, I think I did just use Guilliman Flesh, and while it was wet I mixed in some Volupus Pink on their tails and ears. Their horns and spikes that are growing out their backs are Skeletal Horde. Sticks are done in, not Lead Belcher, well, Lead Belcher Silver for the silver part, Snakebite Leather for all the sticks. Bandages are just the base coat, and the sewer water is the Mantis Warrior Green with some Nurgling slime drizzled over it. The dog might be about to bark at someone. Don't do it. Just because another dog's barking, you don't need to join in. Don't make me do a cut. I'm trying to show off Skaven. Oops, as I almost dropped one. There is another dog barking. So obviously she has to bark for dominance. This one's having trouble getting into focus. You know, the other ones are kind of small as well. So let's zoom in again here, just to and try not catch the camera right. As annoyed as she is by another dog, she just uses that as an excuse to drop more toys at my feet. She's being very awkward. But anyway, that's 3 out of the 6 in the warband. I think she's calmed down now. That's the 3 that are all spewing the noxious fumes. Then we just have the 2 that are just there to be warm bodies, take hits and die over the people who are more important, essentially. Oh, now you're crying. Yeah, she is such an attention seeker. She knows how to do it as well, because she knows if I'm talking like this, like I can't really keep going if she keeps on making noise. But let's try and get through the Plague Pack first. They'll be getting another show of it as well whenever some more Underworlds gets recorded. Not sure who we're up against yet, but there we go. I like this one with his nose poking out from under the hood. It's kind of cute. And again, the same. Oh, well, you know what? I did forget to mention, to make all the bottoms of their robes look grimy. I think that he's actually the best example of that. While the Militarum green was damp, just mixed in a little bit of snakebite leather, just to give it that kind of horrible, it's been dragged across a sewer look. And then finally their mascot, Skabic. No, he's called Scribble. Nope, something like that. I'm blanking on the name, but they've got a pet giant rat who's hugging a bit of warpstone. He looks especially ill. He's got boils all over his body, but he's happy about it, and he exists just to befoul areas. And if you kill him, you don't even get anything for it. He just gets removed from the table to make you feel extra bad if you decide to go after him. So next we have a single, technically Age of Sigmar model. This is a Lord of Plagues for the Maggotkin. It's a very old sculpt. I remember this sculpt being around for years, which is also why he's a little bit short compared to more recent Nurgle releases. He's about the same height as Fecula for the Wormspat for Underworlds. And I actually used the exact same colours I talked about when I was talking about the Wormspat to paint this guy. It is one of my favourite sculpts. Certainly if I played Age of Sigmar, this would be one of the ones I would have gone nice and early, because he's lovely in a Nurgle kind of way. The reason he is here, and the reason I painted him up, is because I am planning on getting into Warhammer Warcry, which, the thing that's putting me off Warcry, which I even think I've mentioned in the series, is kind of like the official warbands for Warcry. Not a lot of them appeal to me visually. I don't like how a lot of them look. But what I didn't realise about Warcry is basically like 90, well maybe not 90%, but a lot of the stuff for Age of Sigmar, you can use in Warcry. They've given stat cards for them. So for instance, this Lord of Plagues, you wouldn't find him in a warband for Warcry, but he's got stats. You can use him. So I can actually use the models I do like the look of in Age of Sigmar, from Age of Sigmar, in Warcry, and make warbands with models I like, as opposed to using the ones that I think don't really look that nice. So I'm branching out into that. I sold off some old, really old, like pre-Primaris, like 3rd, 4th edition 40k stuff that was just taking up space in my storage, and I've used the funds I got from that to fund going into Warcry a little bit. So that's kind of the start of that. It'll take a while, probably. Warcry, it's slightly larger than Underworld. I think the biggest team you can have in Warcry is 15 models, which isn't that many in the grand scheme of things compared to your big, 6x4 tabletop games like 40k, etc. But it is still a few. Like for people like a Nurgle team, you're probably looking at 6 models maybe, so it's not too bad. And I love that almost without exception, every warband for Underworlds, including, as of the most recent White Dwarf, I think, Skabic's Plague Pack, they can all be used in Warcry as well. So there's a lot of synergy between the two games. You get a lot of value out of your money as a result, because you could play 2 games from one box. Like one warband for Underworlds is like 20 quid if you go to friendly gaming stores to get the 20% off Games Workshop prices. And they won't add up to the full points you need for Warcry. Warcry is a 1,000 point game, as I say, 15 miniatures max, but it will give you like half of it for 20 quid. Half of a playable list, which is really good value and genuinely shocking that Games Workshop are the people who produce these games. But I think it's because they desperately want Warcry and Underworlds to be more popular than they are. So that's why they are being more than fair with the pricing and the interplay between the both of them. So let's finish on a little bit of the Batman miniature game, starting with Michael Keaton Batman. I do unfortunately have a complaint about this one. I said on Twitter when I posted a picture of this that he came miscast. That's not actually the case. I realised what the problem was. I'm going to have to zoom in, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to zoom in. And I'm going to have to show you his weird looking face. And the reason his face is weird looking is because the sprue he comes on has part of the sprue attached to his face. I don't mean it's attached below his chin or above his head, you know, as is common with most miniatures. It was attached to his face, to his mouth, to his nose, to his jawline. So no matter how good you are at clipping off sprue, there's going to be a little bit of, you know, snippage, you know what I mean? I tried to clean it up with a knife, with a modelling knife, and I tried. I didn't succeed, but I certainly tried. So that has resulted in Michael's face here not looking great, which is a great shame because I'm actually really happy with how the model turned out in terms of looking like his suit. And most of it is just the two black contrast paints, Black Templar and Black Legion. I forget which I used for his cape and which I used for his suit, but I used both, one on each of them, just to create that two-tone black. So if you've ever wondered what the difference is between those two contrast blacks that are available, this is the perfect model because I literally used just those. I think I then did a little bit of highlighting with Storm Vermin for his suit, because he had, like, the Michael Keaton Batman movies, he's just wearing a rubber suit. So just to make it look a little bit more like that, and then Null Oil over the top for definition. But that is the difference between the two contrast black paints. I used the orc name yellow for his belt and for his insignia that I didn't really pick out that well. That one's on me. I just don't have the detail for that as I get a text message. But the jaw being so weird looking, that's all on Night Models being very stupid with where they attach their sprue, which is a great shame. Now, before we talk about Bane's wrestlers, give me 1 second. So, from the last unboxing I did for the Batman miniature game, we have Bird as he appeared in the comics, not Bird as he appeared in the Arkham Origins video game, and for some reason two luchador wrestler people who I wouldn't really associate with how Bane is portrayed mostly. Like, yes, he does do luchador stuff, but he is not a luchador. He is a very deadly, very intelligent mercenary that had a drug problem. So, I don't know where these people came out of. It could actually be from a comic, one that I've not read. Bird I obviously know because that is how Bird should look. But these two, no idea. I also can't say the name of one of them because I keep this channel family friendly. So he's just going to be the Red Bee. And him, I don't even remember his name. But I painted these a little while ago. As I say, I've been waiting to do this update for a bit. So to be honest, the colours I used, I don't really remember. I could certainly guess like Bal Red, Wildwood, Aethermatic Blue maybe. No, Frostheart. Frostheart for his belt. Snake Bite Leather for any and all crates, and silver obviously is just Lead Belcher Silver, and Basilicanum Grey for all the bases. So he's a sidekick option for Bane's crew. And then we do have our wrestlers here. I deliberately went over his skin tone twice with Gilliman Flesh to give him that bit more of a tanned look, or maybe sweating look. He's got his protein shake there and his wrestling belt. He's fun. I like this guy more than the other one. The other one, it took me a while to get around to putting them together because I was loathing trying to put that pose together, because without assembly instructions and even with them, it's an absolute nightmare to try and do this. And I didn't do it right. Like, you might be looking at it thinking, well, what are you complaining about? You managed it. Nope, this is not how it's supposed to look at all. If I turn it in certain directions, let's see, if I turn it like here, you'll see that his foot is actually misplaced. You probably can't see it actually. Maybe I've hidden it well enough, but this crate is not where it's supposed to be. This foot is not where it's supposed to be. I did that on purpose so it had a second point of contact to hold him better. This foot is slightly off place, and so is this crate down here. I think they're roughly where they should be. So if you are looking at this and being like, I don't know how to assemble them either, that's roughly right. It's just they aren't quite where they should be. Like, they're in the right order. It's just I couldn't quite get them to line up right. I'm not sure why, I just couldn't. But thankfully, it's weird looking at, like, I like how he looks there. He's doing a big elbow drop from the top rope rather. Very fun model, very silly, very goofy, kind of came out of absolutely nowhere. And an interesting option if you didn't want to just run mercs with guns in a Bane list. Very hard to get focused on the camera, I'm noticing as well. The dog has seen something that's upsetting her, so I guess that's all we're going to say about this wrestler, and I'll be back in a second to wrap things up. And that, as they say, is that. Another update on what I've been getting painted. I think it's been like 3 weeks after I said there'd be more keeping to the 2 weeks, but how was I supposed to know a game would come along that I have to really focus on? It takes up most of my recording time. Speaking of which, as I mentioned, next time we'll be seeing more from the Resident Evil game. You'll be seeing more of the scenery that I've been trying to get through. Potentially the BattleTech starter set if I can find the time. You'll definitely see some more Underworlds because I've got a warband in progress. You'll definitely see a boss for the Resident Evil game, because I have that in progress right now as well. Nothing for the Batman miniature game, nothing for Crisis Protocol. Don't really have the expendable funds at the minute to pick up anything for either of those. But you will also see some Age of Sigmar stuff specifically for use as Warcry. Not getting into Age of Sigmar, but I'm getting into Warcry. I want to give it a go. I've decided. Now that I know I can make my own warbands from models I like, definitely going to appeal to me more. So I'm focusing on that and just doing like 1 or 2 models from different factions or different Grand Alliances. That's what they're called. Different Grand Alliances, mixing in Underworld stuff and then being like, oh hey. Also, if you also bought Cursed City back in the day and were equally as disappointed with it as I was, you can use the models from that to play a full game of Warcry. One side of it, obviously, but you get enough vampires and whatever they're called, flesh terror, nope, flesh somethings. The models in the box for the baddies. You can use them to field an entire warband in Warcry, 1000 points easily. So that is another use for those if you gave up on Cursed City like I did back in the day. Anyway, I hope this helped encourage you to get through your pile of grey shame, and helps you if you were wanting to get into painting as a result of perhaps picking up Resident Evil and looking for some ideas. Contrast paint is expensive, but 1 bottle will go very far, and if you do want to paint up the zombies like I painted them, you would need maybe 6 colours and a couple of pots of the base coat. That's about it really, and 1 wash, or just aggressor shade if you just wanted to paint up stuff from that box would be enough. You don't really need neon oil. But either way, thank you very much for listening to my ramblings as per usual. I will see you in roughly 2 weeks, maybe more, for the next one. Until then, ta-ta for now.